Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. The NBA, like the NFL, looking to boost business overseas. The Basketball League wrapping up its global games ahead of the start of the 15-16 regular season October 27th. NBA teams visited Madrid, Milan, cities in China, and Rio to play local teams. The Orlando Magic traveled to Rio for a trip that featured multiple community service events, including lessons for local kids put on by players, as well as an exhibition game against hometown club Flamengo. A large reason for trying to win over the hearts and minds of Brazilian fans is because, as Magic's CEO Alex Martin summarized, last January and February, the prime summer vacation months for Brazilians, the Magic played several regular season games in Orlando, each drawing more than 2,000 ticket-buying fans from Brazil, and one game drew about 3,000 fans from Brazil. Magic executives have been trying to promote their own brand for over a year now in an attempt to develop relationships with major Brazilian companies to attract them as new sponsors. This is just the latest example of an American sports league making a valiant push to expand its reach across the world, taking advantage of a largely untouched market, especially with Olympics coming to Rio next year. Las Vegas is still making a push to get an NHL team, and Fidelity National Financial Chair Bill Foley leading the effort. He continues to try and convince the league and NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman that Las Vegas is more than just casinos and gambling, and there's a demand for hockey that can be sustained. Foley said, "I don't believe Bettman believes how Vegas responded in terms of season ticket deposits. We have 13,500 season ticket deposits, and these are not casinos. This is the people of Las Vegas. We have deposits for a team that doesn't exist, for an arena that's not yet built." That's when it all started coming together. Foley and those involved in the city's bid hope to be given a team by early 2016 so they can start organizing the franchise and putting the necessary pieces in their respective places. NHL expansion seems a certainty, especially with the $500 million expansion fee. Las Vegas seems to be included as part of a Seattle, Quebec City, and Arizona relocation master plan discussion.
Clear, he's got away. Saved! Somehow
and overseas soccer teams continue to score in the U.S. While official details have not yet been released, sources said ESPN outbid several networks for a U.S. package of European soccer rights that include the 2020 European Cup, World Cup qualifiers, and the planned UEFA Nations League tournament of friendlies. The sources say the price tag is more than $110 million, a huge jump from the current rights fees. Univision won the Spanish-language rights to do the same package of events in a deal set to be around $70 million. Neither network has actually signed a contract yet, but that's expected to happen in the near future to finalize all terms. And as global soccer continues to become a mainstream offering in the United States, expect the rights fees to continue to skyrocket. And now to the world of college sports, our guest, Oklahoma Athletic Director, Joe Castiglione.
Athletic Director of the Year in 2004, again in 2009, 7 national championships in football, softball, gymnastics as Athletic Director, University of Oklahoma. The esteemed Joe Castiglione, how are you?
Well, I'm doing great. Looking forward and excited about what lies ahead.
It's got to be the way it is. We said we would look forward in all contexts. So, first of all, the Power 5 is now probably the way we would refer to how you find yourself in the middle of a Power 5 conference at the top of the heap of one of those conferences, but it changes the entire dynamic of the way college football is administered these days, I'll bet you would say. Tell me, just at the outset, how things have changed for you day to day in the last couple of years.
Well, the focus is still on the student athlete, as it should be. And, you know, I said since I got into this business that anything and everything we do must have a tie back to creating the best, if not, an unforgettable experience for the student athletes that are under our supervision. And regardless of the sport in which they play, they come to a university with, dreams and aspirations and trying to find their way, and we're here to try to provide the resources and the structure and the ability for them to use their gifts to get an education and leave here with a meaningful degree. And while they're at it, they come with some special talents that they actually can use, both in gaining, the financial aid as well as, the opportunity to compete against the best in the country, and then learn, all the other aspects of growing and becoming, a more prepared person, when they're ready to leave. And so that's still our primary responsibility. But as we go forward, we're having to face, so many more challenges and trying to provide that opportunity, and we're working through it. Sometimes, you could point at one, two, or, 3 different things, and we wish we could have been able to do them sooner than we've been able to do them. And now we've made the changes in our governance structure, as you referred to at the outset, that allow us to make, decisions that permit us to use some of the resources to help student athletes. And, yet we're, seems like every week or so someone's challenging, the role of amateurism, and we're trying to deal with that too. But, every day that we have student athletes under our leadership, we're trying to provide them the best model so they can be prepared when they leave.
And Joe, we've talked about this before, obviously. You run a tight ship at one of the top 15, 20, maybe even more revenue-producing athletic programs in the country. What's it like, the new feeling of effectively budgeting to uncertainty? You've always got to do some planning in advance. This is a business show. We now have the O'Bannon case winding its way through the appellate level. We've got the Power 5 shake-up. You've been on the governing committee, so you understand how things are changing. Conference musical chairs may be over in many respects, but the allocation of dollars to student athletes is evolving as well. So is your pencil sharpened in a different way than it was a couple of years ago?
It certainly is. In spite of, the constant reports of increased revenue, be it coming from the inception of a college football playoff or conference revenue sharing, which is fortified by television rights fees. There are probably just as many examples that don't get talked about referring to the rise in expense. It's much more challenging to try and create a broad-based athletic program, a successful one on top of that, than it's ever been. And people can point to 1, 2, or 3 different things in that regard too, and say, well, if it wasn't for this, you wouldn't have these kinds of pressures. But we don't individually get to define the marketplace at each and every turn, but we still have to respond to it. That is, in fact, if we want to, continue to remain competitive in certain areas. And so, sometimes, things grow in rates that are mind-boggling, but again, we have a choice to do it or not, and then, accept the repercussions from whatever decision we made either way. And so it is more challenging than it's ever been before. But, we have to remain entrepreneurial. We at Oklahoma are one of only 5 universities left in America at any level that can say they're truly self-sustaining, which by definition is operating under our own power. We don't receive any financial support from the state, no tax appropriations or anything of that nature. We don't have any institutional financial subsidies, nor do we have any student fees that flow to intercollegiate athletics. Whatever penny, dime, dollar we spend, we have to generate on our own. On top of that, we're good stewards of our resources, and we're actually helping the university to a tune of about $8 million per year. So we have to be entrepreneurial. But when we do that, Rick, we don't operate, totally with the idea of commercialization. We're trying to figure out, the revenue streams that are possible and generate, those new streams to go back to, funding the model we have for, in our case, 21 sports, almost 600 student athletes, and that we're paying our way, building state-of-the-art facilities, trying to provide all the resources for student athletes, hiring and retaining outstanding coaches and staff, and as I mentioned, being a great extension of the university mission.
It's a hard question to ask because I'm asking you for that crimson-colored crystal ball for you to take it out and look a decade ahead. You can't even look a week ahead in some contexts. But as one of the self-sustaining five, you're in a different situation, yet you're viewed as a consensus builder as it relates to governance for entire D1 structure in the future, and I'd say probably all of college athletics. Are your problems and issues more similar or different than, we could call them the have-nots, let's call them the non-revenue sustaining D1 schools, and then the D2, D3, I know they go by another name, schools, and how do you reconcile the differences and disparities over time as you look at issues like number of sports you have to have, men's versus women's playoff system, all of the recruiting student athletes, let's call it, all of those issues are huge issues, but they're dealt with differently at different levels. So comment on that if that's not too much to comment on.
Well, I might go into the wrong area when I answer your question with a question. And the question would be, who is it we're trying to be? Are we trying to be competitive with schools that are in a different category in terms of their ability to generate revenue, or are we trying to be competitive with the schools that have like missions, like opportunities, like sources of revenue? And one gets into trouble when we don't want to take away the American dream and the idea of improving and building a program and becoming successful, because if not for that, we wouldn't have seen some of the great stories in sport. But some of the frustrations come into play, Rick, as you mentioned, when certain schools that don't have the means, and not because any of us say they don't, it's just they're operating within their ability to generate those kinds of resources, trying to be like another school that has significantly more opportunity. And so therein lies the rub. We can't legislate that, nor should we, and we shouldn't take away someone's aspirational opportunity to grow their program and strengthen their university. That doesn't float in America in a way of thinking of improving, but sometimes these arguments get defined along those lines. And if we are supposed to create a homogeneous approach where everybody has the same resources, well, then somebody needs to tell us that, and if not, we want to be able to, focus on, what's in our best interest at our university and try to strengthen our own conference and, our conference in competing against, other conferences, if you will. I mean, it's not really the conference to conference, that's probably not well said, but more the institutions trying to compete for championships. And that's the decision we've made, and we're trying to do the best we can with it. And for me to, tell or say what another institution should or should not do is not, it's just not right. We just have to be able to focus on what we can do. And I think the idea behind, the changed governance structure is, is to be able to allow the schools with the ability to, create and provide resources the chance to do that, and not necessarily require the others to do it too. So that's why the legislation has been termed permissive, not required. So that allows schools to decide what they want to do.
Are we happy with the current new playoff system, and how quickly do we go to 8?
Well, I'm in the camp of letting it play out a little bit longer, but I said previously that I think it's going to be difficult to keep it at 4 for a long time. The differences, between the top 4 or 6 teams are so small that it's going to be tough, to have a playoff that doesn't include enough teams that have been considered comparable to each other. Perhaps it'll go to 8. I don't think it would ever need to go beyond 8. I really don't. I've thought about it, and I do think in our world and way we're set up, I think 8 would be the right number if it did expand. But I've seen models that allow 6 to be in the mix, if you will, and so I guess you could say there's an interim step there. I don't have the crystal ball for that, Rick, and so I know what I hear from others, that there isn't any appetite to go beyond 4, but we just have too many schools that are doing so well, and this is an outgrowth of the parity we've talked about for the last 3 decades. We saw it coming. We have rules that allowed it to develop when the scholarship limitations were put into play. So we shouldn't be surprised that there are more universities having better seasons than we've seen, in our history. That in some ways was by design, and secondly by people's willingness to step forward and build their programs. And look at the top 10 right now. So this, as I said earlier, is an extension of opportunity we have in America. That if somebody sets a goal and they want to build their program, so be it.
Final question, really important one. What is the biggest challenge, or has been the biggest challenge for you, running a 21-sport monolith to a level that causes you to be named the Athletic Director of the Year by Sports Business Daily in 2009, or successfully walking on and actually playing football at the University of Maryland in the late 60s?
Well, it's never about one person, ever. And so I take myself out of the equation in the largest sense, if you will, because I've been fortunate to work with highly talented, highly driven, and successful people. And I really think that it's been the collective efforts of great people that make an organization successful, that allows it to meet the challenges head on, to attract, the next wave of successful people. And that's what we do in college athletics. We're always having, an opportunity to develop the people that are in our program, but they move on and open the door for the next wave of people seeking the same opportunity to fulfill a dream. And I've been very fortunate to have great support from the presidential level, the board level, and have an opportunity to work with the same president now for my 18th year, having continuity in our coaching ranks, and the winningest football coach in Oklahoma history, and Bob Stoops, and having 2 great basketball coaches, and Lon Kruger, Sherry Cole, both setting records in their own right and what they've done in their career. And as you mentioned earlier in the interview, that we've had success in a lot of other programs across the board, and that's where the rubber meets the road. It's the quality of people, and for me, playing a small role in trying to help create the resources so they can be successful and develop the talents they've had, and in turn recruit the best and brightest student athletes that want to be at Oklahoma.
That answer, ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, explains why Joe Castiglione is one of the definitive consensus builders in all of college sports. Thanks, Joe.
Rick, my pleasure. Look forward to talking with you again.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. The producer of the show is Alex Cohen. Audio producer Adam Wiesen. Technical assistance provided by Jamie Weber, Tanner Simpkins, and Carlos Swadek. The executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso.